The world of technology continues to disrupt businesses around the world, and 2024 was no different. As we look ahead to 2025, what will be the big technology trends that will shake up companies? We're going to speak with our favorite futurist on this episode of Today in Tech. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Today in Tech. I'm Keith Shaw. Joining me on the show today is Mike Bechtel. He is the chief futurist at Deloitte and a regular guest on the Today in Tech show. Welcome back, Mike. Happy New Year.
Oh, Happy New Year, Keith. Thanks for having me, brother.
All right, so let's talk about the it's called Tech Trends 2025. This is a big report. I think you guys have been doing this for 16 years now.
Yeah. Deloitte has been chronicling what's new and what's next for a full generation of enterprise IT.
Oh, wow. And so if you can, now we talked about this, the 2024 report last February. So I tried to catch us, get us a little closer. This is going out in January. So give me a brief overview of the report and then talk about these 6 buckets that you've been able to put a lot of these trends into so that there's an overall arching view, but then within those buckets, there are specific trends that we're going to talk about.
Yeah, for sure. So, Keith and audience, the thing about being a futurist, right? And you can imagine, right? We discussed a little of this, what I've been on in the past. People say, what, do you got a crystal ball or something? And I go, no. In fact, there's a distinct lack of clairvoyance or astrology involved.
Yeah.
To be a credible futurist is actually to be a bit of a historian. And to take a wide angle lens. And so one of the benefits of doing Deloitte Tech Trends for 16 years is you get a pretty good pattern detector, right? To separate, needles from hay, signal from noise, pick your cliche. But the 6 areas that seem to matter most, right? As we look back through our historical data and as we do our present tense work, you've got human-computer interaction. Right, the ways that people are working with tech. And what we've seen, Keith, is generally that trends towards simplicity, intuitiveness, clarity, right? Then you've got the information layer, right? We used to call it, in the olden times, business logic, right? Algorithms, decision-making. That trends towards more intelligence, right? Ever smarter systems. The third bucket that really seems to matter is computation. The horsepower, the processing, right? The ability to work better, faster, cheaper, stronger, do more with less. The arc bends towards abundance or strength. Now, if any of y'all are thinking about this and saying that all sounds kind of up in the air and optimistic,
right? I
would tell you those 3 we call those the elevating forces because that tends to be where growth comes from, right? If you can deliver simpler, smarter, stronger, there's probably a VC out there ready to stroke you a check right now.
Right.
But Deloitte's clients are enterprises, household name organizations that have a rep to protect. And there are some grounding forces, or as I like to say, some adulting that needs to go on to complement all that optimism. And so that's stuff like the culture, talent, finance side of IT. We call that the business of IT.
Yeah.
Frankly, the recognition that people, what do they say? Culture eats strategy for breakfast. Indeed.
Right.
Then you've got cyber, right? There are barbarians at the gate and baddies who are out to do us harm. And so you need to protect the house. And then finally, you've got core modernization, which sounds a little rusty, maybe a little crusty, but the fact is a good 70% of enterprise IT budgets are focused on nursing old Bessie along.
Right.
And keeping that core going. And so each year, those are the 6 treasure hunts that matter, but there's always something new in each of those buckets each year.
And I think I can't remember if I asked you this on the 2024 edition, but this is a brilliant way of looking at the future, because you've got the 3 trends that are the lofty goals, the high end, and then the other 3 are almost pulling down on some of these forces. So you've got almost obstacles and challenges while you also have ambitious goals. And then so is there a push and pull? And then the second question, or really the first question, is did you come up with this right at the initial, or has these 6 trends developed maybe like halfway through these 16 years?
Yeah. I'll take those last in, first out,
Yeah.
as a proper geek would say. LIFO stack. Thanks. I'm here all day. But here's the thing, Keith. This emerged. This was really derived from first principles. When we started Deloitte Tech Trends 16 years ago, you could imagine it was a cavalcade of novelties, right?
Right.
What seems to matter? What subset of it really matters? And when we did the work to back test where things tended to be enduring and where things tended to be kind of ephemeral, right? Flash in the pan. What we found was, as regards growth trends, those three elevating ones, if you didn't deliver on simpler, smarter, or stronger, you probably weren't long for the world. And so we focused our treasure hunt there. And then on the grounding or gravity forces, if you weren't focused on business, baddies, right? Or as I said, the old bucket, you probably weren't long for the world either. And
Right.
so they emerged through the work.
All right. And as we look, before we get into the 2025 trends, is it fair to look at what you were talked about in 2024? And then is it almost like a report card? Like, did you hit on it? Did you not hit on it? Or do you not do that? Because again, a lot of these are predictions, and sometimes you have to go back and go, well, maybe we were too soon on this. I think we talked about this on the last show. It's like sometimes you have this grand idea of where technology might be going, but then the market response is like, well, not yet. And I think especially with AR, VR, and spatial computing, it's a come on. I know we want to get there, but we just it's like
Right.
pulling that mule along, right?
Yeah. No, I'm happy to look back.
Okay.
And again, if I'm going to open with futurists or secretly historians, if I were allergic to my own history, I wouldn't be. It wouldn't be much of a in the way of integrity. Maybe we could start with interaction in last year. We talked about this idea of interfaces in new places, and that whole trend was a bit of a Trojan horse for the larval stage emergence of spatial computing.
Right.
Super straight talk, Keith. VR has felt 2 years away for the last 25 years.
Right. I remember in the 90s, we were still talking about VR as this great thing.
Right. But here's why that's okay. 25 years ago, virtual reality was a situated experience at the mall.
Yep.
Where, you'd pay, I don't know, inflation adjusted $50
Right.
to wire yourself into a multiplayer video game. And one of the things we've seen on the interface front, Keith, is that interface tech, it tends to make this move from tech to toy to tool.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, from demo to plaything to utility. And so last year in Deloitte Tech Trends, we said, hey, listen, there are major investments afoot by big tech and small tech alike that are going to start marking the retirement of screens and rectangles.
Yep.
In favor of virtual and augmented experiences. So how did we do on this trend? Here's what I would tell you. Incomplete.
Okay.
I wouldn't give it an A or a D. I would tell you that we're seeing form factors like headsets from large, Magnificent Seven type firms that we've all heard of.
Yep.
They're graduating into slightly less sort of expensive and cumbersome glasses. And those are in turn en route to graduating towards things like contact lenses. Then you have a whole other, since we last talked, the emergence of AI pins that can project the pixels on the lived experience. Early days.
Yeah. Wow, is that optimistic?
Well, here's the scoop.
Listen, you're the optimist. I'm the cynic. So I'm going to say, again, we talked about this ahead of in 2024, and this was before Apple Vision Pro came out. I mean, and I know you guys don't want to talk about company names, but I'm allowed to. So, Apple Vision Pro came out. Meta came out with its new Oculus, but it also seems like they are hitting on these Ray-Ban glasses. And I don't know if it was a surprise to them or they actually saw some adoption and said, oh, well, we can now double down on this because we actually are seeing some traction on this. There was a lot of discussion after the Vision Pro of like, this is great, but we need a lighter version. And then we need, so they could see the path towards augmented reality. But so, it does feel like, yeah, like you said, we are at the beginnings. It just hasn't hit yet. I saw a story today, for example, of like someone wrote an article. It was like, we finally have the killer app for VR. And then I didn't read the story yet, so I'm not sure if that's just hyperbole or not. It probably is. But we are seeing the beginnings of form factor changes, so that, recognizing that the Daft Punk style helmet, headset, ski goggle things probably isn't going to be what we want to get to. But you have to walk before you can run, right?
Well, I think you're precisely right.
Yeah.
There are a lot of transitional technologies throughout history that were themselves liminal or gateway techs. I remember 8-track tapes. That was
Yeah.
It was less compelling than an LP, but its job was to get us towards cassettes, ergo mini discs, ergo, MP3s, and now everything you need in your pocket. One of the things we're seeing as we pivot this trend forward to this year, Keith, just a little teaser on 25. Much of the activity around spatial computing is moving away from the kit, right? The actual experiential interface, and into all of that necessary walk before run data management that needs to happen if we're going to manage spatial data. We talk to clients all over the world who basically said, listen, 3D CAD, computer-aided design, rendering data has pretty much started and ended with architects and designers, and that now needs to be unlocked so it can play nicely with all the other data in an enterprise so that all these AI systems can talk to it. And so one of our favorite case studies or stories this year is we talked to the Portuguese soccer team, Benfica. And these cats are using computer vision to track all of the players running around on their team and opponents' teams during games to understand precisely where they're at, their habits, their tendencies, weaknesses, and strengths. And when you think of it, none of this involves headsets, but it's all decidedly spatial, new data types, and in their case, a means of optimizing team performance, sort of Moneyball for soccer.
Yeah.
And you think, okay, this is spatial computing too, just minus the gear on the head.
Right. Okay. So within the enterprise business space, you are seeing more movement than that you might see in the consumer side of things. I think we've talked about digital twins and manufacturing. Yeah. Is that momentum still going strong for a lot of those companies that are making products, building things? Are they getting learnings from the data? And I'm sorry, I just used the word learnings because I know that's not the right use of the word.
Learnings. Oh no. The jargon's rubbing off on you.
Oh, I know. Sorry.
No, Keith. I would say it's not only continuing; it's accelerating. We talked to Paramount Global, and really interesting story. They're doing studio lot tours for their new joiners. And when we asked them in AR, VR, and I said, why for? And the answer really surprised us. It was, well, because the studio lot's typically super busy, teeming with folks. Half of it is taped off because you can't get back there. And here's a means to experience the entire platonic ideal of the back lot without actually having to be there. Oil and gas companies doing drones on pipelines and spatial data to understand oil flow. Health authorities building digital twins for the patient experience from specialist to generalist. At the bird's eye level, it's taken off. I think the tendency is we need to overcome the tendency to throw the baby out with the bathwater because we don't want to wear big things on our head.
Yeah. So and again, we'll jump into this, talk about the prediction for this year or this year's trends within that spatial side. And we'll get to the other trends too. But with 2025, is that idea of the screens going away or merging into something else, is that still around? Or because it still feels I'm looking at way too many screens.
Yeah, you and me both.
But then I don't know exactly what's going to replace it either. And,
Well, I think what's interesting is, and we'll hit this in a bit with our hardware strikes back.
Okay.
Hardware is eating the world
Yep.
trend, but we're going to see an enterprise technology refresh like we haven't in a generation, thanks to AI chips and NPUs.
Okay.
That's going to bring a new wave of physical kit that's still situated and still screen based, but maybe a bit less as a pro futurist and a bit more as a dad. I see straight talk, Keith.
Yeah.
I see my 12-year-old son hanging out with friends, right, in a 3D virtual headset environment, more, not less than he did last year, and more, not less than he did during the pandemic. And
Right.
so, generationally speaking, I think this is a slow and steady.
Okay. But don't you as a dad then feel concerned about his ability to socialize in real life?
I don't think it's an either or. Honestly, I feel like it's both, because when he's AFK, away from keyboard, or call it AFG, away from goggles, he's playing basketball and football, baseball,
All right.
and goofing off in the backyard. And so
Yeah.
it's still screen time, and too much of anything is too much. It's just that those screens are, two lenses and a diopter on his face, as opposed to, playing Doom on a desktop.
I have noticed that with my teenagers at this point, it feels like they have passed the top of the curve and are coming back to reality a little bit more. So because during Thanksgiving, for example, nobody had their phones out. We actually had, a fun conversation, and then we played some games that were, in reality. Mainly because I think because it was scratch tickets that were up for grabs. So we were playing a
Right.
game where they could win. So they saw an incentive to be off of their phone at this point.
Right.
But it was
Yeah.
a good family moment where, we actually did talk, face to face, more so than we normally do. So
Yeah, these better. Another trend under this trend is, the pandemic dystopia
yeah.
was, I need an escape from my family room.
Hmm.
How about a virtual world? I think, to your point, Keith, you said it well. We're heading into a moment of balance where let's augment the world we're in,
Right.
Let's paint pixels on the real.
Right. But not completely
It's
shut us off from that. So
right.
that,
And when you use jargon, right, when it's augmented reality,
yeah.
eyes understandably glaze over. But when you say, let's bring reality itself online, you say, okay, I can get behind that.
Okay.
And I think that's really where spatial computing is headed. It's reality itself coming online.
All right, so let's jump into some of the other trends, because I know that a lot of these are similar to the stuff that was going on in 2024, and I don't want to. I always want to look forward. I mean, with looking back is okay, but looking forward. So for the first one was AI everywhere, and basically you're saying tasks will become more intuitive and efficient, reshaping industries such as healthcare, logistics, education, and this idea of, I think you guys put this in the report, AI will be as ubiquitous as electricity, almost to the sense of, which makes me ask the question, will people even care whether or not, or know whether or not there's AI embedded in their what technology at that point? Like I don't care. I mean, I did when I was learning about electricity in school, but I don't,
Right.
all I know is when I flip the switch, is it power on or power off?
Right.
And if it breaks, then I call an electrician who has learned all about that stuff. So is it going to be that with AI technology? It's fun to learn about it now, but in the future, who's going to care, right?
Well,
There's a lot to unpack. I'm sorry, Mike.
no, it's good. It's good. I like the back to LIFO FIFO stacks. I'll peel off one of those great
All right.
questions. The AI everywhere theme, I like to think of it as, in some ways, it's AI undercover or AI underground, and here's what I mean by that. I remember, I'm old enough now, as you and I've joked me, not you, I'm a geek turning geezer,
Hmm.
and so I'm old enough to remember there was a period where self-respecting technologists troubled themselves with the workings of the hypertext transfer protocol.
Right.
And it's a 7 layer stack, and you've got to learn TCP/IP. And and then one day you didn't,
Right.
because it was presumed, it was substructure, it was just part of the cooking. And so whether you liken it to electricity, to the transistor, to HTTP, what we're slowly starting to see is that AI stops itself being the headline and starts to back into the firmament of other things that are interesting. Like, whip me up a 30-second video with AI, right? Whip me up a customer call center agent that's surprisingly competent and gasp empathic with AI, right? And so when we say AI everywhere, it's a bit of a wink and a nod to the recognition that yes, it's the 800-pound gorilla everybody's talking about, but in the same way we don't yak about the World Wide Web 20 years on,
Right.
it's just going to be part of the cooking. And I think, to your point, maybe we will or maybe we won't care, and it's dependent on scope, right? And so uh, I was having a conversation with a client. He said, there are cases wherein I want to know if my food is certified organic. And so it's regulated and labeled as such.
Hmm.
There's other cases and where it's just like, no, I just want a tasty snack for $1, right? And so I think content will feel like that. The utility of AI is almost inversely proportional to the stakes,
Yeah. It
right?
does feel like we're still a little early. Or we're still a little early in this ubiquitousness where people are. I think people, when they see that you can do something with AI, I still feel like I still have to explain to them that, oh yeah, I drew this picture with AI. Or,
Right.
I did something over the weekend where I was in a play, and as a cast gift, I gave everybody a little button that I made of their character in the play based on their photo. I'd uploaded their photo and then had ChatGPT draw a picture of the character in the style of the play that we were doing. Okay, it's a long explanation for something that it doesn't really matter. But when I gave these gifts out, I said, "Oh, I had AI do this." And now maybe, a few years from now, I'll just be like, oh, here's a gift. And I won't have to then use that explanation. It'll just be like, look how cool I am or that I could do
Well,
this.
yeah. Keith, I remember one of my college roommates back in the mid 90s. I'll always, his name is Mark, and I'll always remember Mark. Mark was one of the first people who got into the habit of hitting the World Wide Web for seemingly everyday tasks.
Yeah.
So, like, hey, we need to book a trip to that basketball game. I'll go online to do it. And you're like, wow. And to your point, it was notable how he did it. One day it simply evolved to, yeah, of course you would. And I think that, in the same way that, a reasonable trip involves packing shoes, a reasonable, any given reasonable task will have its moments where you augment yourself with your posse of intelligent agents.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so you just led me right into the next topic, which is what's next for AI. And we're moving from LLMs to smaller, more efficient models, but then also agentic AI, which is the big topic that I've probably spent the last 5 or 6 shows talking about with a number of different guests. So does this mean that we're going to be seeing the end of this one size fits all approach to AI? That you're going to start seeing very specific AI for very specific tasks, and are users ready to adopt this and even potentially pay for it, rather than just maybe one specific tool? Because it felt like the last couple of years has always been, which of these big giant GPT / tools do I use and adopt, and is there any difference between them? And now it feels like it's almost like what happened with TV channels and cable channels, where you had 3. You remember the days of 3, right, Mike?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And then cable came along and we went to 20, and now we have a bajillion different options for entertainment, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Keith, not only do I agree that we're moving from monolithic, one chat box to rule them all, into a plurality, but in our Deloitte Tech Trends, we've got interviews and case studies with companies who are declaring like this is how it's going to be.
Yeah.
I mean, we talked with Dell, an executive named Vivek Mohindra, who looks after a lot of their AI work. He says the one size fits all approach it's not going to be passed. It's already passed.
Yeah.
And part of it, part of it comes down to right sizing the tool. Like you don't need a jackhammer for everything,
Right.
right? Sometimes you need a ball peen hammer, sometimes you need a rubber mallet. And so when you think about a small language model, it's not an acknowledgement that like, hey, I prefer to work with slightly less intelligent artificial colleagues. No, it's I need, right, a cheap and cheerful domain specific model trained on call center questions.
Yeah.
And not only does it not need to understand Socratic philosophy, I'd rather customers can't ask, right? And so, from an energy usage standpoint, a clarity of intent standpoint, this actually helps rather than hurts. Because there's this old line, Keith, in the innovation space, we always say innovation loves constraints. What does that mean? Well,
Yeah.
what it means is you ask somebody, come up with a good idea, they're starstruck, right? Rather, you ask somebody, hey, this tool can paint a cartoon puppy of your choosing, as long as you stick to these 6 colors and these 7 names. People have a great time,
Right.
right? And so imagine AI agents help the user because the user knows their superpower. Oh, this one is the butler. I'll ask it for X. Oh, that one is the call center. Oh, that one is the medical student.
Okay. All right. So I get that. So, but I haven't talked to you since this whole agentic AI stuff really started taking off. And so
Right.
what I need is I need you to put your futurist hat on. and,
Sure.
and explain to me in technology, in words that I can understand,
Sure.
the appeal of these AI agents. Because I've been battling with this in my head and with some other guests. We start going down the path of trying to come up with some use cases where and again, you could separate it between business and consumers if you want. I just see from a consumer standpoint, we started thinking about, all right, I currently spend this much time planning a trip. And so, you have to look at hotels and flights and then what are you going to do and what city you're going to go to and all of this other stuff. And what we do now is we go online and we click and click and click and click and click. And so I think that the idea around having an AI agent doing all of this for us is, say, hey, I want to go to Florida in January, find me the best flight, find me the best, but the word, as I go down that rabbit hole of trying to figure it out, it also means that I have to open up most of my data to this AI so that the AI can figure out that I don't want to fly Spirit Airlines, but I'm okay with JetBlue, but I'm okay, and I don't want United Airlines. And they're all going to know that because I've told it before or it knows my history. So the more I get down these rabbit holes of what the AI is going to need in order to fill that quest, then my head starts to get exploding. Like it just starts to get like, okay, I don't know if I'm ready for that yet. And now, am I using the wrong use case here? Because that's totally possible. Am I assuming that an AI agent means that I want Jarvis from Marvel's, Iron Man, and that you just ask it a question and boom, you get the answer, and you not only get the answer, but it's doing these tasks. Does there need to be a reframing of our expectations for what AI agents are going to do? And I know that was again 7 questions at once.
I would never change because I'm here for the richness of it all. And truly, I mean, because I think we're similar in that regard. There's a lot there, and that's what makes us human.
Right.
Here's what's really helped me, right? It in the same way that when somebody would talk about blockchain technology, and my eyes would roll to the back of my head when I'd hear about immutability or a triple ledger,
Right.
right? When I hear about agentic AI, it's easy to think like, oh goodness, here we go. Here's a linguistic reframe on the whole thing that's plain spoken.
Okay.
We're talking about computerized concierges who know their role and place.
Okay.
And moreover, they can delegate to other computerized concierges in a federated manner that frees me from having to worry about how the sausage is made.
Okay.
And so the analogy I like to use is if you remember there's an old TV show. It's not that old, but you know.
You're gonna make me either feel really young or really old.
Okay, here we go. Risky click inbound. Downton Abbey.
Okay, that's not too bad.
Okay, right.
I do remember Downton Abbey.
Good old Lord Grantham, right? He didn't say, gas the car, make my lunch, pickles no ham, tie the bow tie, small knot today, shoes shined, thanks, right? He would say instead, I'm going to town. And the staff knew what to do because the butler had a job and the cook had a job and the valet had a job and the chauffeur had a job. And critically, they would coordinate between each other. And so this, I believe, this is my understandability system for an agentic AI future, where you simply say, I'm going to Cleveland, and your collection of computerized concierges figure it out on your behalf as a network of intelligent agents. It's a digital sort of Downton Abbey with a recognition that role specificity and federation between roles is a feature, not a bug.
Okay. Have you used this analogy before in any of your other interviews?
Not in the last.
Because.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, because this is the first time I've heard an agentic AI system being described as basically think of Downton Abbey.
Well, it's certainly it's something that I've used 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay.
Right. So putting my futurist hat on as per your request, 4 or 5 years ago, people would say, what's next in human computer interaction and AI?
Yeah.
And you never know the name for the next thing.
Right.
Right. Like you never really know the name. Before it was cloud, it was massively parallel grid computing. Right. But then it was simply cloud.
Right.
Before we knew the name for agentic, we would call it ambient experience or federated experiential agents. And it's nerdy and it's long-winded. Things usually are until they're ready for prime time.
Yeah.
But we would use that sort of digital staff analogy 4 or 5 years ago for this very concept.
Yeah. I mean, I almost like AI concierge or AI butler almost. That I think people would get that and understand that in that within the agentic AI space, you're going to have hierarchies similar to what they do at Downton Abbey with reporting and so that the Lord Grantham being the human, right?
Right.
Like you don't have to worry about talking directly to the cook unless you are specifically talking to them about something that's food related.
Well,
but it's almost like you would give your order to the boss AI,
right,
and then the boss AI then delegates it to all the other people.
Right. And in the older parlance of functions and method calls and object-oriented programming, it's the same basic concept.
Yeah.
What we're introducing is a level of agency where these things have the permission to act, and that's where we get the word agent from.
Right.
Is you're free to figure it out. I trust you, little buddy. Right.
Okay.
ServiceNow is doing this with their Xanadu platform. Salesforce is up to this with their Agentforce platform. Databricks, it's coming because it's useful.
Okay. You mentioned the big T word, which is trust. Given what you've seen so far with a lot of the generative AI hits and misses, is humanity ready for that? To give some of that trust to these agents?
Well, one of the things we're seeing as Deloitte, Keith, is that trust trumps tech. And none of this stuff is worth a lick if you haven't thought of the governance and risk and ethics and security models from the jump, right? You don't put that on as the final coat of paint. You start with that at detailed design. And so something I began to mention earlier, but I think it really fits right here is, the utility inappropriateness of some of these tools is inversely proportional to the stakes. So, we've talked about travel planning because to a certain degree, you know, YOLO, right? Like,
Yep.
like, oh, wait, I said this kind of hotel room, not that kind. Well, womp womp. Um, that doesn't fly when you're talking about healthcare. It probably doesn't fly when you're talking about banking. And so I think on a sector by sector, use case by use case standpoint, the question is this the kind of problem that requires precision of the style we associate with calculators?
Yeah.
Or is this the kind of problem that for which the old line, horseshoes and hand grenades is sufficient?
Right.
And for those things for which a very good effort is merely very useful, great. But for other things, no, we need perfect.
Right. Well, yeah. So it feels like the early efforts at agentic AI will then be lower stakes use cases, at least, to build enough trust to then tackle these bigger ones. Because
Well, yeah, and in talking with some of these client stories and case studies we mentioned, like with the folks at Dell, at ServiceNow, there's a fellow named Chris Beatty at ServiceNow who is the chief customer officer, and he says agentic AI cannot completely take the place of a human, but what it can do is work alongside your teams,
right.
repetitive bits, seeking out information and resources, doing the backgrounding. Again, at the risk of a cliche, human in the loop. If there's a human in the loop, then bring on the robot reinforcements.
Right.
But by all means, you need that human because I forget who said this quote, but a machine can never be accountable, right? And so you need to have a human who is.
Right. Right. And again, so when you're talking about trust too, I started thinking about this, that when we first started to buy things online, once we saw that it worked, well,
Right.
if I went to Amazon and I bought a book and they delivered it. Now, this was back in the days when it would take maybe a couple of weeks to deliver it, but eventually, now we're at 24-hour delivery on some of this stuff. But we wouldn't have gotten to that point if we didn't have that initial trust with that first attempt, right? Like,
Right.
so we could always go back and look at, like, I trust that when I push this button on this computer that it's going to turn on. So so maybe the talk about trust it's always important to talk about the trust, but at some point the trust then becomes implicit in the system that you're using. How's that for a futurist comment?
Well, Keith, I think you're right. There's that old movie line: if you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball.
Right.
and I think it in the case of if you're an online bookseller in the 90s, you're moving up the value stack to figure out exactly when do you hit what a retail expert would call a considered purchase,
Yeah.
aka this is too risky of a click for online. And what you find is not only do norms change, but they change generationally. There's apparently a meme running around, and I learned about this from my teenage son. He said, the difference between a millennial and Gen Z, and I said, no, do tell. Right? And he said millennials will only buy expensive things on a laptop, whereas the younger generation would be happy to do it with their thumbs on a phone.
Wow. Okay.
And I thought experientially that's me. Like, oh, it's the term life insurance discussion, honey. Let's sit at the desk.
Okay. Right.
So I do think that there's a sort of a trust ladder where people just get normed to what's acceptable to do online and or with agents.
We could talk about my usage of Venmo. About how.
Tell me about it.
Again, it was like, I think initially, maybe generationally, you start hearing about something that people are doing, and you're like, oh, why would anyone want to ever pay someone through their phone? And you're like, well, what? You can't write a check, or you can't give them cash, or all this other stuff. And now I find myself, we're at a dinner with four people, and I was like, just, you know, pay me via Venmo, and I'll take care of it. Because again, the ease of use, and you know, it's now second nature. All right, I need to. We could talk all day about how you and I are eventually adopting technologies, but I want to get into some of these more trends. So the next one on my list is hardware resurgence, and this is what you were talking about. Hardware's eating the world, and again, you're looking at it from advanced chips, transforming computation. Offering sustainability and edge capabilities on the internal hardware side of things. What I wanted to ask you too, and you can go ahead and explain how that's going to change the world. I think a lot of people have, do understand that. But does this also mean that we may see new hardware designs that have moved beyond the notebook, phone, tablet? I mean, tablets have been kind of, they were cool for a while, and now I don't know. I don't feel like that they're as cool. But does that also then kind of work? I think you also then mentioned IoT and robotics in some sense, but that always feels nichey to me. So go.
Go, right. Start your engine.
Cool. I'm not going to apologize for asking 3 questions each time now.
It's good. It's all good. Keith, we titled this year's chapter Hardware is Eating the World as a 13-year removed retort to Mark Andreessen's famous statement that software was eating the world. And I used to be a venture capitalist before I was, a professional futurist. And the basic IQ test for a VC in the teens was, is it a software company? And is it an as-a-service company? And if it checked both boxes, then it was in the bounds of investability. Why? Because for a generation, the hockey stick business stories tended to involve bits and pixels and not atoms and things.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I could bore everybody to tears with why, defensibility, reverse engineer ability, scalability, but software ate the world. Well, what we found was in this moment of AI fueled workloads and AI undercover and AI everywhere, hardware matters again.
Mm-hmm.
And putting our business hat on, CIOs and CTOs for the first time in a professional generation are thinking of hardware kit not as commodity, not as something to be outsourced and off my desk, but as the basis for important strategic decisions. And so it's showing up right now, Keith, in 2 places. One is the data center story,
Okay.
right? What had been a 10-year unidirectional kind of one-way march towards cloud and outsource it is suddenly, it's not the inverse. It's just that it's a discussion.
Yeah.
It's, for our healthcare call center agentic solution, it might be good to have those next gen machines in our basement.
Right.
Why? Because it might be a competitive differentiator, right? Or it might not, right? None of this is a recrimination of cloud. It's just that it's suddenly a little less of a no-brainer. Okay. So there's the server GPU, NPU side. That's that. Then on the other side, it's this whole AI laptop, desktop, phone thing.
Yeah.
Because there's a suite of nice to have and maybe soon to be need to have capabilities that will work on new computers and not now computers. And so this refresh, this CIOs being asked to think about laptop purchasing and provisioning, nobody's really had to pull too much hair out over that one in 15 years, but here we are.
Interesting. But we have yet to see something that's really excited people on that hardware side, on the end user side yet. Unless, and again, maybe you're seeing things that we're not seeing yet. So,
well, I think with anything, there's a supply and demand moment, right? In conversations with HP and Dell, right? You're seeing serious, not just investment, but enthusiasm, right? I was at conferences for one of those entities a couple of months ago, and you saw a whole folks or group of people who are like, hardware's back on the menu,
Hmm.
boys.
Hmm.
So there's there's readiness on the supply side. I think on the demand side, here's where these trends all connect. If you believe in small language models, domain specific use cases, governance, um, security, there's going to be a need. Let's say you're a Department of Defense entity that needs to run your code on a local machine in a SCIF. And SCIF is DoD jargon for disconnected from the broader web.
Oh, okay, I thought you meant like a boat.
No, no, yeah, right. That's no different SCIF.
Okay.
But but all of a sudden, your business requirement is I need to do just enough of that generative AI business,
Yeah.
but ideally on a air-gapped device in this room. Okay, clearest AI PC story I've ever heard.
Yeah.
And so that it's going to start there and then start to essentially long tail its way out to a collection of activities that for governance, risk, security, and cyber reasons, clients are going to say, well, we'd rather have that on device so we can control it and if you
Yeah.
wipe it.
All right. So in that case, I think we're going to see adoption probably for specific vertical industries and vertical niche applications, and then it'll eventually trickle down to that horizontal general business use case.
Almost the inverse of the AI thing, right?
Yeah.
Instead of starting with books and ending up with cars,
Right.
it'll start with, fancy and end up with everybody.
All right. I still got three other trends that I want to talk about. So
Love it.
sorry, I'm hurrying up here. All right. You talk about IT being amplified, and a lot of these themes were around the idea of citizen developers, automation, and shift to lean IT strategies. I know I've seen a lot of companies that are trying to adopt this citizen developer movement. I know last year we talked about from DevOps to DevX, where it was specific developer experiences. Did you see that movement last year into this year, or are we continuing that trend? And because again, I think from an employee standpoint, when I hear about citizen developers, I'm like my cynic flag goes up and goes, oh great, so you want me to do all of this job, and now I've got to develop my own apps in order to
Right.
proceed and that puts the brick wall up again. Although I did find myself using AI for specific purposes within my job, but I've yet to get to those low code, no code platforms because it still feels like programming to me.
Well, it's picking I'll go FIFO this
Okay.
time.
All right.
So on the DevOps to DevX front from last year's trend,
Yep.
the real spirit and letter of that law, of that trend, was that techies tick differently, and companies are putting a incentive and organizational structure in place to better match what makes techies tick, right? And so this was things like outperformance being rewarded with free time and autonomy,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to outperformance being rewarded with here's a briefcase, stop coding, right? Now, AKA management.
Right.
We have seen that, and I'll go close to home on this one, Keith. At Deloitte, for the last 12 months, we've gone gangbusters on an engineer first culture. What does that mean? It means red tape removal left, right, and center. It means an acknowledgement that technical specialists are themselves senior execs worthy of titles, rewards, and all that commensurate with their tech guru-ness, not just their sort of people management skills.
Right.
This idea of an engineer-led culture has been a really big part of our last year. In the broader market, Google, we talked to Google this year about their move towards not just a developer first culture, but now moving into this year's trend, which is IT amplified, the recognition that these AI tools shouldn't be thought of as, oh, good, we don't need Toby anymore.
Yeah. Because it
It
feels
should be
like that's
more
a
like,
bad
oh,
trend.
100%.
Yeah.
Right. The really interesting story, and what we're seeing is separating leaders from laggards as regards IT use in the IT shop. AI use in the IT shop is that companies that realize they can automate or augment their people's performance with AI, they then redeploy those people on the strategic backlog. It's, oh, good. We can finally get around to that one project because Toby's finally available.
Right.
And so I think when we talk about IT Amplified, it's a resistance to try to shrink your way to success,
Yep.
and do,
Yep.
know, that would be a lazy move. I think the better move is, okay, it's IT's moment to embolden because we've finally got the capacity we need to do bigger and better things.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right, we'll see if a lot of the corporations and the big companies out there recognize this, and I'm sure that there are good and bad in both, in all of those.
Right.
Like making the leap from we just need to cut to save money and we'll just do it with AI versus the more optimistic view, which is no, let your AI do the stuff that nobody likes to do, freeing up the people to do these more creative things. The cynic in me, and I'm again, I know you're the optimist, Mike, but the cynic in me, I'm starting to think that people just don't want to work anymore. But no, not in the way of like a generational, not in the wake of a generational thing where you're like, oh, these young people, they don't want to work. It almost feels like I would be willing to. I'm trying to figure out what, and I asked this to other people. If you could have AI that could take away most of your mundane tasks, what would you do with that extra time? And most people don't really know what they would do with that extra time because they haven't been given that opportunity yet.
Right.
How's that for it's like,
Keith,
and I try to ask that myself. It's like, what would I do if I had more time? Maybe I would just spend more time talking to guests and doing multiple shows. And if I had an AI agent that could schedule these things a lot faster than what I currently do, maybe, or would I spend more time on the post-show stuff to get more people to actually watch this show? Maybe that would be one of the things that, I could attempt.
There are cartoonish extremes. On the left end,
Mm-hmm.
you have, when I was a kid, it was even an old show in the 80s when I was a kid, but there was the Jetsons.
Right.
And George Jetson, from what I could gather as a kid, he worked a vigorous 1 hour day wherein he laid back in a chair and pressed a button. and it was never lost on me that my dad probably thinks that's pretty much my job too, because I sit in a chair and press buttons. Now, that said, I do it for 8 hours a day.
Right.
And 5 days a week.
Right.
Because at the northern extreme, the dystopian extreme would be ever more toil. And what I think, again, with the futurist / historian hat on, when you pull the lens back, broadly speaking, most folks work a professional-ish week, driven as much by societal norms and human fatigue, right, as is appropriate, right, the right mix of charge recharge.
Yep.
But then decharge recharge. But then what you find is the nature of the work elevates, right? And so my grandmother wouldn't recognize what I do for a living as work,
Right.
And that's not a self roast. That's just a truth, true for most of us. And so as my friend and fellow futurist Mike Walsh says, he's really nailed it in a pithy way. He says, our job is every time we automate, we need to make sure we elevate. And that a leader's job, and we see this at Deloitte, we're helping leaders through the recognition that AI properly framed isn't a weight loss pill. It's rocket fuel for higher ambitions.
Mm-hmm.
To your point, Keith, as delivered in a reasonable professional day.
Yeah. That's pretty profound, Mike. I'm gonna admit it. That's a really good way of putting that. So, all right, moving on.
Thank you.
All right, this one.
Flattered.
All right, so this is in the quantum computing / cybersecurity bucket. So this would be under the cyber and trust area, right? We want to talk about post-quantum encryption My question for you around this theme is how real is the risk of quantum computers being able to break current encryption? Is this a red flag that we're putting up that this could be a future problem? And we need to get ready for this? Or is this just another pitch for quantum computing, which I think needs a name change of some sort, because you use the word, you hear the word quantum and everyone's eyes just start to glaze over. Like, it's weird. I understand what AI is, but quantum computing, there's just a mental block that I have.
Well, in the spirit of leveraging my built environment, hold on.
Okay, this is the first time a guest has left their chair.
Props.
All right.
So, do you recognize this gentleman?
No, and I'm gonna probably hit myself when you tell me who it is.
Okay, it's okay. It's okay. For those on audio, it's a picture of a black and white individual from the '60s. It's Richard Feynman.
Okay. Yeah.
Who member of the Manhattan Project, quantum physicist, and his superpower. And the reason I have a framed picture of him in my office is because he's a bit of a hero, because he was a science communicator. His superpower was making the complex understandable to mere mortals.
Yep.
And he famously said, Keith, he said, even quantum physicists barely understand, let alone could explain quantum computing.
Yeah.
And so that's a long build to say, Keith, you're not alone.
Yep.
With the eyes glazing over. But here's the punchline, and why this matters, and why this is our trend this year around cyber and risk. There's a day coming that we might call Y2Q. It's like Y2K. Remember Y2K?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Y2K, we knew the date. It was definitionally the year 2000. Y2Q, the rub is we don't know the date. But when a quantum supercomputer achieves what's called quantum supremacy, aka in plain English, the ability to break the SHA-256 algorithm and the elliptical encryption algorithms that power most passwords in enterprise security, the day that happens, look out.
Right.
All the secrets are flying around, and dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria.
Okay.
And so our trend recognizes that the urgency is 100. I'm sorry, the importance is 100. This is going to happen, but the urgency is undefined. We don't know when. Some would say in the next 2 to 3 years, right? There was a publicly announced just recently advance in the Willow architecture from Google, announcing certain forms of quantum supremacy just recently. And so what a responsible adult in the cybersecurity industry needs to be aware of is that there are emerging standards from NIST, right? The standards body, that say if you replace your your cryptographic plumbing, your security password infrastructures with lattice-based approaches, modern quantum-proof defense postures, when the baddies figure that stuff out,
yep,
you'll be okay.
Okay.
And so, again, urgency is undetermined.
Right.
But we know the ways to protect, and so let's get busy starting that protection so it's not a scramble and mad dash in N years' time.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think a lot of companies are ready for that, or are they more reactive than proactive there?
Well, the trick with cyber, Keith, and I've seen it, right, firsthand in discussions with clients just over the last couple of weeks, is there's never not a present tense fire, right?
Yeah.
There's anywhere between 1 and 15,000, foreign princes, if you remember them in email, trying to phish or inject ransomware or do a denial of service or, prompt injection right today. And so I think the trick in cyber is, in a world where there's always something urgent going on, how do we peel away enough bandwidth to do the important?
Yep.
And I think, frankly, it's one of the reasons Tech Trends this here is saying, listen, there's something coming, and there's a mountain beyond today's mountain.
Yeah.
That would be cheaper and easier to solve today than in a reactive scramble tomorrow.
Okay. And then, all right, the one final one, because I know we're running on time here. And again, this is like not saving dessert. This is more like putting off the vegetables here. Intelligent core modernization. And I think we talked about this in 2024 as well. So now the trend is that AI is going to be central to upgrading these legacy systems for smarter operations, and again, emphasizing human oversight and governance. So what's different between this year's trend and last year's trend? Because it does feel like, I think last year you were talking a lot about preventative IT, or there was something word preventative health versus just fixing. There was like this healthcare analogy you had.
Yeah. And thanks for the chuckle, because even core modernization professionals acknowledge that it can feel a little bit more like vegetables than dessert. The term that's thrown around in the world of core mod is technical debt.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot.
Yeah, and tech debt, as the cool kids say. It's a bummer because the reason we use the word debt, right, is that the money spent keeping the old things going is money that can't be spent on building these cool tomorrows we've been talking about.
Right.
And so, whereas last year's trend was this recognition that, hey, just like an apple a day keeps the doctor away, a little thoughtful preventative health,
right,
like an app a day, right, could keep the big expensive modernization bill away, right? Well, here's how AI is juicing that a bit. There's a collection of stories we've picked up this year, talking with folks like ServiceNow, talking with a client of ours called Graybar, an electrical and comms organization. They're saying, listen, we're actually putting AI tools into our core systems, right, mainframes and beyond, to help us understand where things are going from sort of green to yellow or yellow to red.
Yeah.
And then not just saying, hey, come take care of this, but beginning to automagically do some of that self-healing repair themselves. And what's pretty swell about that is, this whole discussion today has been all about AI's promise being less time on muck so that we can unlock the magic.
Right.
Well, where a better place to unmuck, right, than that old COBOL system that you'd rather not look at.
Right.
So in short, it's AI making a dent in maybe one of the less customer facing places. It's in that core business operations space that frankly could benefit from automation more than most. Yeah.
Okay. All right, Mike, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. I know we could talk for another hour or two about a lot of these things. So again, what's the best way for people to kind of absorb these trends? Read the whole report, 72 pages. It's great. It's not homework. But I do think that the trends you're indicating for business users, especially, very valuable. So where can people go? Like, just type it in, or we'll provide a link on the bottom of the page here.
Link is great.
Yeah.
Your search engine of choice, Deloitte Tech Trends
2025. Make sure you use the right year.
And Keith, it's just the feeling's mutual, sir. I could talk with you for another half a day and shared experiences, but appreciate your time today as well, Keith.
And we'll get you back. We'll get you back before the end of next year, or we'll probably. I'm sure I'm going to come up with an idea where I was like, I need to talk to Mike about this. So I appreciate the time you took to take out to do this interview.
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you. All right. That's all the time we've got for this week's episode. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, add any thoughts you have below. Join us every week for new episodes of Today in Tech. I'm Keith Shaw. Thanks for watching.